Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Camp Shane, Camp Camelot, Camp New Heights, Camp Jumpstart. What do these summer camps have in common? They focus on weight loss for kids who are overweight or who have obesity. Every week, I send out a newsletter called The Munch. In October, I highlighted an article from the New York Times about Camp Shane, a weight loss camp for kids. It sparked a lot of comments from readers, and one in particular stood out. It was from my guest today, Lauren Harris Pincus. Lauren is a nutrition communications specialist, speaker, spokesperson, and registered dietitian in private practice. Her business is called Nutrition Starring You, and it's based in New Jersey, where she specializes in weight management and prediabetes. She's authored 2 cookbooks, the Protein Packed Breakfast Club and the Everything Easy Prediabetes Cookbook, and she is formerly a child with obesity herself. She dedicates herself to combating the growing adult and childhood obesity epidemic. And I'm very pleased and happy that you wanted to come on the show today, Lauren. So welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Jill. I'm thrilled to sit down for this conversation today.
Well, let's get started by getting to know you just a little bit better. I know I read your bio, but we always love to hear my guests, or I love to hear my guests talk about the work that they do in their own words. So tell us about the work that you do right now.
My work has evolved over time. I've been a registered dietitian for over 25 years. I joke that there was no internet when I was in school, no email. So things have certainly changed over, a few decades. Right now, I'm primarily a media dietitian, so I do a lot of media work, contributing to publications, both writing and being interviewed for them. I work with brands in speaker and spokesperson roles to try and promote healthy products that I enjoy myself. I also have had a private practice for over 25 years where I do specialize in weight management and prediabetes. And I've authored 2 books, like you said. So I dabble in a lot of different things, but it's always interesting.
Yeah. Well, and you're a mom as well, right, Lauren?
Yes, I have a 21 and an 18-year-old.
All right. So, well, let's talk about your email response to the newsletter that I sent out. And for those of you out there who are listening to the show, you probably got this email as well, and probably had a chance to write about it. But Lauren wrote back to me in response to the newsletter, and I quote, she says, I quote, "I saw that article about Camp Shane too. I grew up with overweight and obesity from a very young age and dieted my way through my entire childhood and adolescence. I attended 2 weight loss camps, one Weight Watchers camp in the Poconos and Camp Camelot near Reading, Pennsylvania. I later worked as a counselor at Camp Camelot between my junior and senior years in college. Do I have stories?" So I guess I so appreciated that reflection, because I think that you're not alone in that there were other kids who are now parents who probably went through similar situations. And I guess my first question for you is, when you saw that article in and of itself in the New York Times, what was your reaction to that article? Because basically the article was about a camp that had been going on for decades and that has recently closed.
Right. I just sort of nodded with it and went, yeah, that's about right.
Mm-hmm.
These camps were meant to assist kids who had overweight and obesity. They had good intentions, I think, overall. We also, again, I was there in the early to mid 80s. Things were very, very different in the early to mid 80s than they are today in what we knew, the way we approached kids who, quote unquote, needed to lose weight, how we viewed overweight and children with overweight and obesity in society, We had an incredibly fewer children who experienced overweight and obesity during that time frame. I think the incidence has tripled or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, in the last couple of decades. It's just far more common now. So when I was a child with overweight, starting even preschool age, I was one of the only ones. And everybody knew who that child was in their classroom. And I got teased and picked last in gym class and wasn't good at athletics and all of those things that just made it not fun to be that kid. And all of that led, through dieting in childhood. And ultimately, when I asked to go to one of those camps when I was 13 for the first time, because I was just really getting sick of it and I needed help. And I felt like that was a good way to, you read all the advertisements, right? And they advertise these promises of these huge weight losses, in a summer. And you say, oh my God, like that would be amazing. So my parents agreed to send me. This was not parents who were shaming me or treated me differently or didn't support me. It was completely the opposite. I was 100% supported as a child. I wasn't singled out. I wasn't meant to feel bad about myself. I didn't have a bad self-image because of my family. If anything, I was suffering at the expense of others, and my family was who supported me and kept me together and grounded and helped to maintain my self-esteem. So I'm very thankful for that, because a lot of kids don't experience that.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like you had more of a bullying experience through the school, through your school situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking like the 70s and early 80s. It was just a different time and nobody cared. There's way more of a zero tolerance policy now for bullying in school.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a friend to stick up for you, nobody did.
Yeah. That was one of the things that in my research for this episode, I went into, some of the research areas that we go to look for the latest research. And I specifically was looking for research on weight loss camps for children, because my instinct, and I think probably many people's instincts, are that this would not be a good thing for children, and that it could most likely lead to psychological harm long term. But when I looked at the research, I was so surprised to see very little research on the topic of weight loss camps for children. And that really surprised me, just that there's a lack of evidence in that area. And a lot of the evidence was really old, from like 2004, 1998, 2014 was the latest one I was able to find. And many of the research articles showed a benefit, showed, yes, BMI drops. Yes, kids feel greater self-esteem. But no, obviously no long-term studies that look at the impact over time. A lot of what that Camp Shane article talked about was the rebound of weight gain, that kids would lose weight during the summer and then they would gain it all the way back, plus some by Thanksgiving, and then return the following summer for weight loss again.
And there's so many reasons for that too. Just the obvious ones are kids don't purchase and cook all of their food. They don't create their home environment. They don't create their school lunch programs. These kids are going from essentially being starved and working out all day to going home and sitting in a chair in school all day long and going back to the home environment where they gain weight in the first place. So that's just logic, as to why their weight tends to come back. I always say it, the kid is a member of the family. And if you have a child with overweight or obesity, it's largely possible that the family also has individuals with overweight or obesity, because we know of the huge genetic component. Whatever lifestyle habits occur in the home contribute to it. largely, right? Because children don't live in isolation. So unless you fix the source of the issue, the kids are going to go to camp, they're going to lose weight, they'll learn something, and hopefully, they do cooking classes and those types of things. So hopefully, the kids do learn some skills and learn about how to read food labels or how to pick things. But in large part, they're kids. So they're not the ones in charge of their health that way. So it just makes sense that they go home and gain it back. And I will say, when I said I had stories, there were a lot of strange eating habits that came out of going to a weight loss camp. So first of all, at both of them, the girls were given 1,200 calories and the boys 1,500. It didn't matter if you were 8 or 18, if you were 100 pounds or 300 pounds. The girls got one calorie amount, the boys got another calorie amount. And you worked out, I'll say worked out loosely, 6 hours a day or so. And that's not including all of the walking back and forth between wherever the bunk was or the dorm if you were on a college campus, because I did both, to wherever the mess hall was or wherever the activities were. Sometimes it was sports or things that just were more fun, like a dodgeball thing where you're moving around, but it's not like an aerobics class. But there were days where it was very, very active, intense physical activity meant to burn calories, an hour swimming laps, an hour aerobics class, an hour playing basketball, an hour on the track, all of those things. In large part taught by counselors who were not whatsoever certified in that vocation. I was teaching aerobics classes. I had no business teaching aerobics classes when I went back to work as a counselor. So that was a little scary, especially since you're dealing with children who likely have medical conditions as well, and who, haven't been exercising to that extent. So when you take kids who've been sitting in school all year and they come there and all of a sudden they're expected to do this amount of physical activity, it's not easy for them and not 100% safe either.
It almost harkens to The Biggest Loser in a way for kids.
It was The Biggest Loser for kids. Absolutely.
Wow.
There were weigh-ins once a week and everybody was, dreaded it and couldn't wait at the same time. And the whole thing of what'd you lose? And then it's a competition. Like somebody lost this much, somebody lost that much. And then you feel badly about yourself if you didn't, or like what I do wrong. And then you're thinking, can I even cut my food further maybe so I can lose more weight? I will tell you, the first camp I went to, the Weight Watchers one, it was in the Poconos. And I mean, talk about getting used to black coffee with sweet and low in it as just something to put into your body. And man, did that taste bad. But you just got used to it. And what we used to do was we used to send our counselors out with like whatever pocket money we had so they could go to the store and they would bring us back just buckets of sugar-free gum and sugar-free Kool-Aid packets. And we would pour the powder into our palm and lick our finger and like eat the sugar-free Kool-Aid with our fingers. So we basically had perfectly stained fingers and palms that you see everybody walking around camp with like blue or purple or red like fingers and palms from all of the dye in the powdered Kool-Aid packet that we would be like Fun Dip. Like, remember that?
Yeah.
Like Little League field Fun Dip thing? But with your finger. It was crazy. We also, like, the treat of the world would be a frozen diet soda that you would just like scrape away at with your spoon to try and like an Italian ice. But it was a frozen diet soda. I mean, like I said, you would do anything to come up with weird combinations of things if you were allowed extra lettuce or if you were allowed some way to get anything that had volume in it to fill you up a little bit more.
Wow. Do you recall being hungry? Like feeling hungry?
It's hard to say. I'm guessing if I was downing black coffee with sweet and low, I was probably hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Suppressing your appetite.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
Yeah. So there were definitely weird, anything that was available that was free. Like you got, let's say, 1 milk serving with each meal, but you didn't want to drink a glass of milk because that was just drinking. So if you got, like, let's say non-fat yogurt as an option, you'd be like, okay, what can I do to this to make it better? So there was like a sugar-free hot chocolate packet. So you'd say, oh, awesome. Okay, I can stir this into the yogurt. There's a reason why there aren't chocolate flavored yogurts, really. Like when you think about it, when you go to buy yogurt in containers to eat it, there really isn't a chocolate flavor because it just doesn't go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was just another interesting thing. We're like, I don't care. I got my yogurt.
So it sounds like a lot of sort of disordered thinking and practices around food and I mean, is it fair to say disordered eating could be an outcome of just the way the structure and the restriction was set up? I mean, we know, and I've talked about this on this show before, we know that restriction is something that very much drives obsession and food seeking behaviors. And so, obviously they're restricting certain types of food there, right? I'm sure you're not having candy and cakes and cookies and all those kinds of foods at weight loss camp. And that can really drive your desire and behaviors towards finding foods that are going to satisfy that need or that desire for those foods that you're absolutely not allowed to eat.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And that's just common sense. I mean, we know that. We know for sure that restriction causes obsessiveness. It's just a fact. I never ended up suffering from that type of behavior after the fact. Fortunately, I'm sure there are people who did. Mm-hmm. But you go home and like I said, I had a very supportive family. So I would come home with like the cookbook that you got from being there for the summer of different recipes that they made. And, my mom would cook them and my family would eat them. I wasn't singled out. That's, that was dinner or whatever. Back in the day, remember, we didn't even have a microwave yet. If you wanted like a Weight Watchers frozen dinner, it had to cook in the oven for 45 or 50 minutes or whatever it was. So I didn't live in a time where ultra processed food was like readily available quickly. So it was almost easier in a sense that you ate the family meal because that's what there was. And my mom cooked healthy every night. We didn't have a lot of junk food in the house. I lived in a house with 3 very thin people, and I was the one that was heavier. We had extended family with obesity. So there was definitely a genetic component there. It just didn't happen to be within my immediate household. Which was good and bad in the sense that I ate what everybody else ate and I was heavier. So I really had a strong genetic component there. If anything, I ate less. Like I would be the one in school with my little brown lunch bag with a sandwich in it. And then I would go with my nickel or 6 cents or whatever to buy my milk. And all my friends are eating like ring dings and Fritos and all that. And I didn't have anything because I was the heavy kid and my mom wouldn't send it for me. But I ate less than my friends and I weighed more. So when we talk about heritability, that's a huge component. And it's so easy for us in society to make judgments and assumptions about people when we just look at them from the outside. But I definitely was not one of those people. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit because I'm not sure that my listeners really will understand when you say heritability is such a big factor. And I know we talk about, from a professional standpoint, we talk about obesity as a disease and that it should be treated as a disease, not a failure of willpower or poor food selection or not enough exercise or what have you. Share what your thoughts are around that or what you know about heritability.
Yeah. So we've learned that your propensity to develop obesity is up to 70% inherited. And I think we're going to learn more and more about that as we go along, because just as we understand more about genetics and identifying different genes, it reveals a lot. But your ability to gain weight is very much inherited. It's not entirely inherited and it's not entirely out of your control. But that's why when we see people who go, oh my God, like they could eat the refrigerator all day long and they don't gain an ounce. And then there's people who are counting every calorie and they weigh a lot more. Just everybody is different. And that's the one thing I can't emphasize enough. Every single body is different. And when that comes to genetics, it comes to the way we treat obesity and the way we have to really assess each and every person individually to see what will work or not for them. And just sticking everybody on their 1,200 or 1,500 calorie diet doesn't address that individuality. And also, inherited health concerns. Somebody may have overweight and obesity and just have really good genes and not have prediabetes and not have high blood pressure and not have high cholesterol. And yes, statistically, their weight may put them in a risk category, but maybe they're fine. Just they got lucky. You know what I mean? That happens. Same thing. Right. There could be people that are very thin who have every one of those lifestyle diseases and they don't have overweight or obesity. And then, people around them or physicians don't think twice about it because they appear lean. So that's a mistake that I think we as society make a lot.
And now a word from our sponsor. Parents ask me why cooking with kids is so important. While there are several reasons, one stands out, and that's building skills through hands-on activities. You and I know that more skills means more competence. With a new line called Yummy Crate, KiwiCo invites the entire family to get hands-on with kid-tested and kid-tasted recipes while building kitchen competence and learning about science along the way. I got to try the Tasty and Toasty project, which focused on the Maillard reaction, or how food browns when it cooks. This project brought to life what actually happens when something browns during the cooking process, whether it's hamburgers or chicken nuggets or bread. From experimenting with the effect of pH on dough to designing artistic creations with pancake art, every Yummy Crate takes your meal to the next level with kid-friendly science, stories, history, and fun food facts in the Yummy Zine magazine. Each crate explores 3 delicious family-friendly recipes and 2 fun projects. Bring kitchen confidence with hands-on experimentation to the kitchen table with Yummy Crate from KiwiCo. Get 50% off your first month plus free shipping with code Nourished at KiwiCo.com. That's 50% off your first month at KiwiCo.com, promo code Nourished. Yeah. Assuming we make a lot of assumptions around heaviness, largeness, thinness, smallness, and we attribute some sort of greater willpower, better lifestyle, and that's simply not true. Can you share with us what it was like to grow up and go to these weight loss camps and possibly, I'm assuming since you went to at least 2 of them, you rebounded, probably lost weight the first time and then regained. But I don't want to make that assumption.
Yeah.
I want to just understand what it was like for you at that time in your life to be excited to go to a weight loss camp and then return to weight loss camp. I mean, what was that experience like for you?
So I had been dieting, air quotes, since I was 7 or 8. I went to Weight Watchers at the recommendation of my pediatrician. I remember having the conversation because they always sat you down in the office, like with your parent, like they didn't talk behind your back. So I remember the doctor saying that, I weighed too much and I needed to lose weight and, I should try Weight Watchers. So this wasn't my mother. A lot of people go, oh, your mother sent you to Weight Watchers at that age. Like how awful that she didn't accept you. No, my mother very much accepted me and I was very loved and supported. The doctor told her that for my health that she should take me to Weight Watchers. So she did, and I remember being there with the grownups in like the support meeting and there were all these grownups and I was this little kid. And it was all about exchanges then. Weight Watchers was based on the diabetes exchanges before any of the point stuff happened. So the original Weight Watchers really just was based on, you get 2 proteins, you get 3 starches, you get 1 fat, and it was healthy and balanced actually, because the idea was that you were supposed to have certain amounts of each thing in your day to have like a nourished body, which actually made sense. It was like that deal-a-meal thing, which was very similar as well. The Richard Simmons deal-a-meal did that too.
Yes.
So
yes, my dad did that.
Yeah, that was Weight Watchers in a card deck, basically.
Yes.
And I would do it, and I would lose weight, and then I wouldn't, and then I would gain some back because I was growing. And as soon as you stop paying attention, you start to gain weight again and get less restrictive. And I just sort of did all those stupid little things, Slim Fast and Lean Line and Weight Watchers. And I remember going to this thing where the family was involved. So they would put the kids in one room, and they would put the parents in another room, and they would teach you about food, and they would talk to the parents. And I remember doing that. And I just never lost anything that I could sustain. And that's when at 13, middle school age, that's always rough socially. So I remember being teased a lot that year, actually, in like 7th grade. And then
the worst grade, I think.
Yeah, it's awful. And then that summer, I went to the first camp, and I'd never been away from home before. So never being away from home before in that environment was probably not the best experience. And I also went in like the second session of camp. So everybody there was already used to being there. And then I showed up and people had their friends. So it was hard socially too. The whole thing was kind of a mess. So, and that was when I was talking about the Kool-Aid and the coffee and all that. And there was I lost probably like 14 pounds, I think, in maybe 3 weeks or so. And I probably would have lost more, but that was like the end of the summer. So then I went back to school afterward. And this camp, this is where my craziest story of all happened. I was very upset about something, and I don't remember what, but it got the assistant director of the camp involved. And he was a young guy. He was probably in his early 20s. And I was on a 3-way call, like with him and my mom, and I wanted to go home.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 13. And camp was almost over. There's probably like another week left. But I can't remember what the issue was, but I was really not having it. And I wanted to go home. And he said something nasty, and my mom went, "That's it. Like, I'm coming to get her," right? So he called me to the office, and he was trying to get me to stay. And his way, remember, I'm a 13-year-old girl, and this is a young 20-something-year-old man. And his way of trying to get me to stay at camp was to tell me, fat girls don't get boyfriends. That's what he said to me. Fat girls don't get boyfriends. That was going to convince me to stay at this weight loss camp. And I just basically went, I am out of here. Like I didn't let that get to me. Thankfully, I'm not sure why. Like that didn't really sit in my head as a trauma, I don't think. And it's largely because I told my mom and she wanted to strangle him with her bare hands. But like I said, I had so much support and I had good self-esteem because of my family. So I didn't let his words, affect me that much, but I clearly never forget it. And it really sits there. And that individual actually, I believe, still runs weight loss camps. And I won't throw him under the bus because I'm not that person, but and I'm sure he's changed because I'm sure he was immature and I'm sure he grew up, but yeah. Is that crazy?
Well, those comments about your weight size or shape, they really stick like Velcro. And I think the other thing that I'm hearing from you, that I'm getting from you, is that your family was immensely supportive to the point where that really mediated the traumas that you were experiencing. And just a couple of shows ago, I had Dr. Kelly Fraden on the show, and she talked about ACEs, acute childhood experiences, which are traumas. And traumas can be anything. It can be from somebody saying something to you about your appearance. It can be much more, it can be physical trauma. It can be pressure at the table to take another bite when you're extremely picky. There's just a lot of these little traumas. And one of the things that she said that really hit home was that, just, 1 to 3 very tuned in, caring adults in a child's life can really moderate those traumas, can really mitigate the damage. And it sounds like you had that in your own family unit, which is wonderful. That being said, I think that my guess is that when you put children in a weight loss camp, it is impossible, I would think, impossible to control the interactions between the children, the interactions between the counselors and the children. It's like you can't control what is said, what is done, how kids react to sort of the structure that's there. I mean, I just feel like it could be a free-for-all.
And the counselors too really were thin because they didn't want to have counselors that weren't quote unquote role models. You know what I mean? So the counselors were thin, probably have always been thin. They didn't have a whole lot of compassion. They were more a little boot campish, a lot of them, come on, like that whole kind of thing. It's like, I'm dying here. I have shin splints and my knee hurts and everything hurts because I'm heavy and I'm not used to doing this kind of activity that you do so easily. So there was that as well. The second camp I went to, I lost much more weight that summer because I went in the earlier session and then I continued to lose weight once I got home. So that summer I lost about 25 pounds, which, I was happy. I was happy with the way I looked. At that point, I was no longer able to buy clothing in a regular store because back in the day, over a 14, you had to go to Lane Bryant actually that was the only one. I think it was like Lane Bryant was the only store where you could go and get clothes. If you were over a 14 in the department store, they didn't have them. So right before I had gone to camp, that was after 9th grade, after my freshman year in high school, at that point I couldn't shop for jeans or anything in like Macy's or a regular department store. So I was done with that. It's like, okay, like this has to happen again because I can't, I just don't want to do that. And it just was affecting my self-esteem that I couldn't wear what my friends were wearing. I couldn't go shopping with people and I had to go to this special store and it just made me feel bad. And I just wasn't happy about it. So, again, I lost like 25 pounds and I felt good. I felt really good. Again, I learned a lot and we brought home recipes and my mom would make them and we would cook and I was getting older. So I was able to do it too. And we had a microwave by then and life started to change a little bit. I didn't gain it back as fast that time. I think largely because I was already probably 15 and my major growth spurt had happened already. Whereas I was significantly shorter, like first time I went. It did take me a couple of years to gain it back because I went from the end of my freshman year to my highest ever the middle of my senior year. And that's when I finally went on the quote unquote major diet of my life. And I lost 50 pounds and I've kept it off for over 30 years. So, and that was a 800 calorie diet that was just stupid, but knowing what I know now would never have anybody do that. But it was like before Nutrisystem, it was before any of that stuff. And it was a similar thing where you went and they gave you food and like they took your blood pressure and vitamins and like they weighed you.
It was medically supervised.
It was medically to an extent. Yeah, it was medically supervised. And it was about 800 calories a day. Back to my black coffee with sweet enough. And but I was so tunnel vision. I didn't care. I was a senior in high school and I said, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't keep up with my friends. I can't wear the clothes I want. Like I can't, exercise the way I want. I just was not happy about it. And I'm like, I need to go to college differently. I need to start over. I need to take control. Everyone gains weight in college too. Like if I don't learn and really start taking responsibility for myself now, I don't know what's going to happen. So, I did it, and I'm sure it was not the best thing. My metabolism was definitely messed up from that forever. I believe, but I kept it off, but it's a daily thing. I mean, I think people think that if you lose weight, you just lose weight, but maintaining it's harder than losing it. You can focus a short period of time on any restrictive regimen and get weight off. It's really the lifestyle that follows it, that includes healthy eating, that includes physical activity, that includes stress management, good sleep hygiene, all those things. It's not just about calories. And that's where I think people miss the boat a lot, especially when it comes to kids. It's not just what you eat. That's one piece, but it's, are you sleeping? Are you stressed out? Do you have stress hormones that are affecting your metabolism and, your hunger? Are you moving around in a helpful way, not just because somebody's forcing you to exercise, but some kind of activity that you think is fun and joyful and sustainable that you can do forever or for, at least consistently for a while, without somebody forcing you. And it's just so many of those things, and people just look at calories, and it's one tiny piece of the puzzle.
Right. If you were to summarize the positives, perhaps, and the negatives of going to a weight loss camp as a child, what would you say? Were there any positives to that experience for you? And if so, what were they? And were there any negative? I mean, what were the negatives that you feel for yourself personally were a result of going to a weight loss camp?
The positives for me were the weight loss, because that was my original goal. Remembering that I'm thinking as a teenager, that was my goal, to lose weight, and I did. I think I became much more physically fit, which was something that I likely would not have done had I just been laying by a pool at home.
Right.
And I did develop some skills, some cooking skills, some nutrition knowledge. I also, socialized with people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And I did get some experience being away from home, which was also healthy. Not relying on my parents for everything. And it wasn't all bad. It wasn't like torture every day or anything. Believe me, there definitely were times where you were hungry, or you didn't like some food and you were kind of out of luck, or you just didn't want to exercise that day or whatever. Yeah. But, and it did definitely bring on some interesting food views and eating habits that were a little strange. Fortunately, I don't think that I retained a lot of the weird things that I did there, because it wasn't necessary when you came home. Yeah. You had access to food and a kitchen, and if you were starving, you ate something, as opposed to, begging for black coffee with sweet and low. And also you just weren't able to exercise like that. So it's not like you had a drill sergeant on top of you when you got home. I think if done well, and it's hard, if done well, I think it can be a great experience. But at the end of the day, it has to involve the family, because if you send somebody back to the environment they came out of that led to their weight gain, or led to whatever habits brought them to come to the camp in the first place, unless you address that, it kind of doesn't matter long term. And I think I don't know how to fix that. Yeah. But that's the unfortunate part, I think, is that no matter what you teach the child, if they go home to a house full of junk and fast food and, and takeout, and, without being supported with all those healthy whole foods with fruits and vegetables and lean proteins and whole grains. And if you don't have that readily available, you don't really have a great chance of succeeding. So there's a lot of factors there. But I think the biggest one is that people they look at the food and they forget that there's a whole person involved here. There's a whole person that is much more than what they weigh. And their overall health is the number one important thing. And nobody ever talked about health. They only talked about weight.
Yeah. I suppose also that every child is a different child and comes to the table with a different temperament and in a different developmental stage. And I mean, I can think of kids who would be negatively affected by some of the comments and some of the, things that they were asked to do, that they would have traumatic experiences in a situation like that, just based on their personality, right? And I think what we don't know is we don't have long-term evidence about the psychological impact of participating in weight loss camps. We can, on the one hand, it might feel very good to be around other individuals where, who are the similar shape, weight, size that you are when you go to a camp like this, like that you're not the only one in the classroom that's larger or bigger. You're amongst your peers and everybody's sort of in the same boat. Mm-hmm. So I would think that might make children feel better in that environment. But I think the long-term, physical impact of weight cycling, obviously, and psychological impact of long-term, repercussions around being in that kind of environment, we just don't know. We don't have the evidence that tells us one way or another. I guess at this juncture, I would love for you just to pass along any kind of insight or advice as an individual who has had this experience. What would you say to a parent with a child that is bigger or heavier in terms of supporting that child?
The most important thing to remember is that you have to treat that child the same as any other family member. When you single out a kid with obesity as having different food rules or different exercise requirements or restrictions, it's not going to result in weight loss. And it's certainly going to affect their relationship with food, their relationship with you, their self-esteem. Everything needs to be adopted by the entire family. It's the only hope of creating successful, sustainable lifestyle changes for that child. You want to get fit together, you want to cook together, you want to learn together, and you want to empower them to make choices within the parameters that will benefit them and the whole family. Because more often than not, you're sharing the same genetics. So oftentimes, if you have a child with obesity or that's at higher risk for prediabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol, chances are you are too. So not always, but more often than not. So I think that, there can never be a downside to being healthier as a family. And the key is just do not have the pantry that you say, oh, your 3 siblings can have anything in here, but you can't touch it. Yeah. You can't create an environment that is doomed to fail for the child that you love. You can't treat them differently. The rules have to apply to everybody, and that's really the number one thing that I think that families kind of get wrong, is that it's about the kid and not about the family.
Yeah. And is there anything that healthcare is getting wrong, in your opinion, when it comes to childhood obesity?
Everything. Well, I mean, first of all, it's 2021 and our system is one of sick care and not healthcare. We wait until people are sick until we help them. Even something like Medicare, which is the gold standard for what gets treated, they don't have coverage for nutrition for prediabetes, but for diabetes. So we have to wait until you have diabetes until we'll cover you. It makes zero sense. So one, the medical and insurance industry is really not set up to deal with overweight and obesity properly. Doctors are not trained properly in dealing with overweight and obesity. They have almost zero nutrition training in medical school and very little training on treating obesity itself. So we have an entire healthcare system with almost 3/4 of our population that has overweight or obesity, and almost nobody who's really adept at treating it.
Yeah.
And even then, like, there's just not enough programs in place. So even if we are trying to support families or trying to support individuals, even from an early stage or once they already have developed obesity or significant obesity, just we don't even have that structure in place to support people. Obesity medications are extremely underutilized. They're very expensive because, again, the healthcare system doesn't really cover them effectively. I guess they'd rather prescribe diabetes drugs and cholesterol drugs and blood pressure drugs than address the weight issue. It's difficult. And I think the other thing too is that, societally, we don't value nutritious food the way that we should. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I always say kid food isn't kid food. There's no such thing as kid food.
Yeah.
Food that's filled with sugar and dyes and all of these unhealthful, non-nutritious, ultra-processed things. Kids need more nutritious food. It's like growing a garden, right? If you try and grow your garden with lousy soil and inadequate sunlight and water, what kind of plants are you going to have? But yet we give our kids all of this junk food because it's all for kids, but they need more nutritious food. So, and then at what point are they supposed to say, I'm not going to eat that anymore because I'm not a kid anymore? The whole thing never made sense to me. So there's so many things that affect this, but ultimately the flaw is in the messaging in the healthcare system. Eat less and move more is useless advice, basically useless. It doesn't help anybody medically or emotionally. And we've seen some people do very inadvisable things for the sake of weight loss. It didn't improve their health, even though the number on the scale may have gone down. So I think it's really important to not confuse weight with health. They're not inextricably tied. And ultimately, the magic is in the quality of the diet, sustainable, enjoyable physical activity, stress management, and sleep hygiene. And that's really the most important 4 things. And it's not about the weight. It's about those 4 things.
It's about your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experiences. I know that some of my listeners will want to get in touch with you, will want to find your books. Can you tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you?
Sure. So my website is nutritionstarringyou.com. 2 R's in starring. People put 1 for some reason. Starring you, Y-O-U.
Staring at you.
Yeah, nutritionstarringyou.com. On Instagram, social media, you can find me at Lauren Pincus, RD, Pincus. My books are the Everything Easy Prediabetes Cookbook and the Protein Packed Breakfast Club. And of course, you can find those on Amazon, or if you go to the cookbooks page on my website, there's other places that you can find them as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren, so much. I really appreciate everything you had to share with us today.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.